Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about the watch market once again. Yes, that's right. We're going to be talking about the watch market, what is going on, as well as some things that I am seeing kind of behind the scenes as a watch dealer at Delray Watch, delraywatch.com, where we work with so many different types of watches, vintage watches, modern watches, predominantly modern, but also we have kind of our hands in a couple of different segments between wholesale and retail. So we see both sides, Federico and I and the rest of the team at Delray Watch, we see both sides of the watch industry, and there are some things that I am seeing, especially with certain brands, that is really making me scratch my head. Even just this past weekend, we sold out of I won't tell you just yet, but we'll get into it, but we sold out of this particular brand that it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. This was a brand that would always historically take a long time to sell, very high-end, nice, finely made watch, but those blew out off the shelves, and it really got me thinking, and I started analyzing and looking at other things. So I'm going to be sharing with you all of these things that I've noticed, and also sharing with you what I think this means for us as watch collectors, enthusiasts, and also technically consumers as well, if we look at it from that standpoint. On the wrist today, I have a vintage LeCoultre Valjoux 72 driven movement chronograph, the same kind of movement that is in vintage Rolex Daytonas and chronographs. I love this watch, and it's actually on a Sinclair strap, my watch strap brand, where we produce, or we have produced for us, different leather straps made by the same leather workers that produce the straps for your favorite brands. So make sure to check out sinclairstraps.com, and obviously do not forget to check out delraywatch.com. So what is going on in the watch industry? Let me share with you first what I noticed that really got me thinking about this, because if you watch this channel and if you watch other channels, you know that there are a lot of things that are pushing up the demands, and there's this increase in collectors that are also entering in this space. But something I noticed over the past weekend is we've added a particular brand, Louis Moinet, to our inventory, and we've added a few of them, and they just sold so quickly. I mean, within 1 or 2 days, and we actually had to source and put some more into inventory. And this really had me scratching my head. Now, this has nothing to do with the quality of the watches, because they are very finely made, high quality watches. And of course, we were selling them at a steep discount, but even in other businesses that I've been a part of in the watch industry before Delray Watch, in different varying degrees, and consulting and helping others in the industry when I was in tech and doing consulting in watches, something I've talked about in the past. But I've been in this space for quite some time, and this has been a brand, among others that I'll mention here, that has just not sold very quickly, because it typically would take someone to be a discerning collector that would go out of the way to get something more than Rolex and really do their homework and find something that was a little bit more, let's say, unique, for the lack of a better term. And other brands you would see very much in the same vein would be something like a Parmigiani Fleurier or even Girard-Perregaux up into this point. And that really got me thinking. Now, I think it's appropriate for us to first consider and share with those that are maybe not up to speed, that most of us probably are, but we can't make these assumptions. As for those of you that are maybe new to watches, Rolex watches are extremely hot. You can't buy them at retail. Then we had Patek Philippe watches, especially the sports watches, now getting into the dress watches. They were very hot, and you just can't buy them at retail. Now you can, depending on what model it is, especially when you get into some of the more dressier pieces, but generally speaking, especially with stainless steel, you can't buy them at retail. They're sold out, long waiting list. Then we got into Audemars Piguet, very much on the same trend a handful of years ago, starting with the Royal Oaks, but trickling out into their other product lines, even the old millinery watches that would also sit on the shelf at Delray Watch and many other watch dealers. These watches are also in demand. And then we got into Vacheron, and it spread out from there. And we're at a point now where I see at Delray Watch, and of course speaking with other dealers and those that are in the industry, and kind of just the chatter that we get as dealers and what moves between different wholesalers and things like that, every brand is seemingly on fire. People want it all. Every watch brand, including the brands that would sit, are just flying off the shelves. I mean, people are buying Porsche design watches that historically would sit. Very cool, interesting designs reminiscent of these kind of sports cars. They're now flying away. Of course, Roger Dubuis has their moment, and the trend is continuing forth with that. But those are very high-end quality watches. Now we have the Louis Moinet, and I never thought I'd see the day where these watches are flying off the shelf. Once again, not for the lack of quality, because they are very high-end, nice, well-made watches. But historically, these would sell at very steep discounts, much steeper than we had them priced at. But I think that's an indicator of where we are in the market in a time, really a showing of just the time that we're in watch collecting today, and the amount of people that are gravitating towards watches and spending the time watching videos like this and other sources to gain more knowledge, to be able to choose what they truly want, more so just than the commonplace. I say commonplace, but technically the most commonplace luxury watch, a Rolex or something along those lines. Now, something I've also noticed, and we work with Authorized Dealers, of course, at Del Rey, and we source new watches for some people, including my friend Matt. He just picked up a Grand Seiko, so make sure to wish him well and congratulate him on the Grand Seiko in the comments below. But from Authorized Dealers and chatter, they're seeing so much foot traffic. A few years ago, Authorized Dealers were honestly very scared. With the rise of e-commerce and YouTube and all of this, Authorized Dealers are slow to move because they're really driven by the brands, which have been slow to move, right? They have to follow certain rules and agreements in order to be authorized sellers of their products, at least the larger, more prominent watch brands, right? The Rolex, the Patek Philippe's, the Audemars Piguet's of the world. But now Authorized Dealers are telling us that even through COVID, even with everything that's gone on, the foot traffic is unbelievable, right? We have one Authorized Dealer that we'd work with to source new watches, and they really just don't want to sell the watches at a discount anymore because they're receiving so much foot traffic, and the amount of watches that they can even get from the brands has also been pulled back a little bit. And the brands are either producing less or they can't keep up with the demand. It could go either way. I think it's probably the latter. They're not being able to keep up with the demand. But nonetheless, the foot traffic is higher than it ever has been in Authorized Dealers. And that is unbelievable to me because truly there was a stretch of 5, 6, 7 years where Authorized Dealers were closing. They were selling their inventory, all the inventory and the watches you would see on your favorite gray market sites or not favorite gray market sites online. That was all coming from these closing dealers that just couldn't hang, could not place the orders. And now the Authorized Dealers that somehow made it through and, were able to kind of scrape by or sell jewelry or diamonds or kind of reinvent themselves. They are thriving and they're selling watches at retail prices. So touching on that, what do I think do I think there's anything helpful that we can learn as watch collectors from that notion? Yes. I think discounts are going away. We see it also on our end. Certain watch brands like Omega and especially the Richemont groups, the brands that are part of Richemont Holding Company, you can look them up, but the Panerais of the world, the discounts are really drying up. I mean, there's such demand now for watches in the Authorized Dealers oftentimes can't get the hottest pieces or the waiting is so long for certain pieces that there's just really no incentive for them to discount because the watches are being sold anyway. And that's also the case for pre-owned as well, right? Like with DelReyWatch.com, we always try to be very competitive in terms of pricing. If you're familiar with us, I'm sure you know that is kind of where we place ourselves in the spectrum of watch dealers out there, try to be very price conscious and also be very competitive with that and deliver the most value. But something we're also noticing is that there's also a lack of inventory coming into us and everything is selling. So even with us, there's really not a lot of wiggle room when it comes down to it. I can share with you a story recently, and this happens every day. Just to truly exemplify the demand we're seeing for watches, not us, but the whole industry, is, we'll receive so many emails and questions from people that will say, hey, I'm very interested. Here's all the questions I have about this watch on your website. Can you tell me more about this scratch, this thing, this dent? And under normal circumstances, yes, absolutely. We'd be glad to do it. Have someone in the office do that for you. But the issue more often than not is that someone just buys the watch potentially seconds after that email is sent. So we're seeing a lot of competitiveness as well for inventory that's out there. And it's not just Rolex. I mean, this can be anything from a Longines all the way up to a Laurent Ferrier. Truly, there are a lot of people buying watches. And it's something that I hear from my friends in real estate investing, where it's very much the same, where those that want inspections and things when purchasing homes and single family homes to live in them, they're just being sold on a wire to someone, or being sold to someone that's pre-approved that doesn't need that inspection process, things along the lines, almost sight unseen, I guess you'd have it. So it's kind of something we're seeing, and that's probably a bigger trend outside of watches. But I think what this shows for us as watch collectors is a couple of things, right? One, I think if you're on the fence about a watch, probably now is the time to buy it. Whether it's a new watch or a pre-owned watch, whether you buy it from Delray Watch or anywhere else, or on the forums or on Watch Recon or Watch You Seek or the Rolex forums, now's probably a good time to buy it. And if you don't, someone else is probably going to buy it before you do, honestly, because the demand is that high. I mean, this is even happening to me when I buy from other wholesalers, or even from customers that will message us trying to sell a watch. They'd already sold it 5 minutes prior before we could even respond to them. So there's a lot of movement. Watches are moving quickly. If you see something, please hop on it, because it is moving quickly, and I see a lot of people that unfortunately do miss out. And of course, the next thing is, if you have a watch that you've been thinking of selling, whether it's been in the back of a drawer or you're just not wearing it and you're just kind of waiting to see what happens, now's probably also a great time. Now, you could hold out, right? It seems counterintuitive that I would say, well, now's a great time to buy, but also a great time to sell. I think if you had the watch for a long time and you're the type that wants to see a realization in an increase in the price or the value of the watch, you can guarantee that you had one now, whereas in the future, maybe not so, right? When looking to buy a watch, I always look for the enjoyment aspect of it, right? You're gonna buy it, you're gonna wear it, but when you sell the watch, it really doesn't become the opposite, right? You're not selling the watch because you hate it. It's possible, but generally you're selling it so you could free up funds to place into something that you'd like better, and in which case those better things are moving more quickly. So if you follow me there, I think you're with me on that, but now's a great time to sell, because watches are selling for all-time premium prices, and they're moving quickly as well. And not only do collectors know that, dealers know that. So I think it's a really great time to sell a watch, certainly as well. And lastly, I want to touch on, and I just have my notes here that I looked down on, because I think this is very important, because I was also scratching my head on this. I seem to see watch brands kind of increasing their prices outside of what traditionally would have been a price increase schedule, right? Recently, I purchased an IWC Portuguese chronograph with the green dial. If you watch the channel, you know it, but you can also see on my Instagram, The Real John P, where I have some pictures of that. But I bought the watch, and I bought it, with a certain retail price. And of course, I'm at Watch Dealers, so I factor in, what I should be paying for these types of things. And then in a matter of a week, it seems that the prices reflected on the IWC website have gone up, and typically or traditionally, the brands would increase the prices either, beginning of the year, or maybe with the release schedules of the watches, considering maybe a Basel World or a Watches and Wonders or the equivalent. That's kind of how it would handle, but unannounced, it seems like they kind of just up the price on this, and I think we're going to see that across the board. Now, it's still the beginning of the year, so there could have been kind of some wiggle room there for the posting of the prices. But I do think this trend is going to branch out to the other brands, and because the brands cannot keep up with the demand oftentimes, especially for the hotter or more desirable pieces, I think it makes sense from a business standpoint that they do raise the prices, right? And they're going to, because if they can produce less watches, because they have limited production capacities, otherwise they'd have to invest in bigger facilities and more watchmakers, which, by the way, are at all-time high in terms of demands. Hans, our watchmaker, can tell you all the times he's tried to be poached every day. But if they could just sell the watches for more, they can produce less and make the same amount, if not more, because of the way that the costs are baked into the production of the watches. So I believe we're going to see the prices on all watches start going up. You see it with Grand Seiko, you see it with the Richemonts. Rolex, of course, no brainer. They're going to raise their prices. Patek Philippe has done this quite significantly in the last few years, and it only makes sense, I think, from a business standpoint for them to do it. Am I happy about it? Do I think that it's maybe going to alienate some buyers? I'm not happy, right? I want as many people to come into watch collecting as possible, not only from a bias perspective, because I do trade in watches, but also just because it's a lot of fun bringing new and exciting perspectives and growing our hobby a hobby that was quite literally nothing 15 to 20 years ago. And now it seems like every celebrity wants to get involved, every business person, every company wants to somehow be involved with watches, including eBay and all the other companies and marketplaces out there. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. But what do you out there think about watches and things that you've noticed or seen? Have any of you felt this kind of increased in pressure to maybe add watches to your collection that you never felt before? I certainly feel it when I talk with other fellow collectors at Del Rey Watch, but I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. Please leave that in the comments below. Please do not forget to check out Del Rey Watch, SinclairStraps.com, as well as my Instagram, The Real John P. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P.